There's an old episode of the sitcom Married with Children in which the main character Al Bundy needs to get a new part for his car. He calls the number of some business where he thinks he can get that part.
Welcome to Irv's World of Junk.
That number is an automated answering system, and he starts
Press
navigating the menus. Now, this is part of the gag of the whole show. As the other characters go about having adventures, Al's on the phone the whole time, putting in further and further details about the exact make, model, and color and everything else about his car. Until finally, hours and hours later, the final question.
Your responses indicate that you own a burnt Sienna mid-century Dodge with 800,000 miles. To verify this information, press 1. Hello, Mr. Bundy.
As I've said many times on the show, a certain amount of targeting and advertising's good. I don't want to see totally irrelevant ads. And I would once in a while like to discover something new through an ad. I hope it's possible to target me as a data scientist, if there's some cool new data science product. That's often called micro-targeting. But can and should the platforms allow something a little further than that? Can you nano-target me? Draw a radius just around my house, or target all the 41-year-old left-handed podcasters that drive '08 Priuses and have parrots. Today's interview explores what's possible, what's allowed, and maybe what comes next.
My name is Angel Cuevas. I'm associate professor at University Charles III in Madrid. That, by the way, is not remembering the current Charles III in UK, but is an old king from Spain. And I'm also a fellow member of the Big Data Institute at the same university.
Yeah, this is off topic, but do you know if your university suddenly got a boost in internet traffic in the last week or so?
I don't know. I'm kidding with some of my colleagues, saying, okay, let's see who get the first person from abroad telling us that we were very smart on putting our name on the new king of the UK. but let's see. But no. I mean, I didn't talk to anyone in the university to see if this boost the traffic towards our university.
No worries, yeah.
You never know. Yeah, so that's funny.
Well, what do you get up to at that university? What's some of your main research interests?
Yeah, okay. So my main research interest, to summarize quickly, will be about the transparency on the internet through advanced measurement technique. So we want to understand how the economic forces in the internet, so mostly big tech companies, the ad tech ecosystem works, and try to find what are the inefficiencies and what are the risks the user are exposed due to the regular activity of these players.
And you touched on some of the bigger players. I guess, is there a full set of cards we can lay out? Who are what's the breadth of the social media platforms that are of interest to you?
I mean, we have mostly focused on Facebook for a long time, and basically the academic arena is full of folks that are working on Twitter. Accessing Twitter data is much easier because Google has a very nice API for academics where you can collect a bunch of data. Somehow we understood, at least 5 6 years back, when we started working on this, we understood that Facebook was actually having more impact on the society. First, because it's multiplied by 4 or 5 at the number of users in the platform, and second, because it drives much more traffic, and third, later this was confirmed with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the US election in 2016, that it had more implication in democratic processes, if you want to call it somehow, which is not only about electoral processes, but go beyond that, and it's how traffic is driven towards news media, which there are some cases in which news media outlets has complained because Facebook has changed their algorithms and suddenly the traffic to their websites reduced by a large percentage, etc., etc. So we thought Facebook was a central player. It is still, but I guess in 2016, 17, 18 was even more important than now, where it is losing some relevance according to the last reports they are doing for investors.
Yeah, maybe so, but still a critical, huge mass and influential platform worthy of study as it stands, regardless of any trend that might be going on, I would say. But to your point in your comparison to Twitter, Twitter is
Mhm.
fairly open. I can use their APIs to quickly get data. Facebook, not so much. It's not entirely closed, but it's mostly closed. That must make it challenging to study. What kind of data can you get access to?
Most of our studies have been conducted through the marketing API or the ads platform API. Basically, this was not originally thought for academics, but for advertisers. So basically, anyone who is listening us have ever tried to run a campaign in Facebook will know a bit about what I'm talking. But any user in Facebook can try to create an ad and run an ad campaign. So you will end up in a dashboard where you have bunch of parameters you can configure for your campaign. Okay, and some information you can get from there is the size of the audience associated to your targeting audience. So, for instance, I can configure a campaign targeting people in Madrid, where I live, ranging between 18 and 25 years old that are interested on MBA. Facebook will report an audience size for that. So this opens up a bunch of possibility we have exploited in our research, but this is not enough. So something we did back in 2016-17 in order to recruit users that allow us to obtain more information regarding elements in general at preference or interest Facebook has assigned them was creating a browser add-on that we call a Facebook data evaluation tool that was applying for your browser, for Chrome browser, Firefox browser, that informed the users about an estimation of the revenue they were generating for Facebook through the consumption of ads. That means through the visualization or clicking through ads. That gave us a good user base. There was more than 10,000 installations, but the user, there is some churn rate, so they install it and disinstall it, the app. But for some time, I'm stable a user base of few thousand users. That allow us to get access to the interest Facebook assigned to the users. And these have permitted us to make some relevant research that got some impact. One in 2017, where we looked at the sensitive attributes Facebook was assigning to the user for advertising purposes. And by sensitive attributes or at preference, I refer to things related to sexual orientation, political preferences, health issues, religious beliefs, ethnical things, which are included as sensitive information, especially they call especially data categories in the European General Data Protection Regulations. So we quantified how many users in the different countries in Europe, and later we extended worldwide our study, were assigned a preference related to these sensitive categories. And we found that the amount of user was huge. So in average in the European Union, there was, if I remember well, there was around in average 70% of the users got some of this ad preference. It's true that Facebook took some time, but has reverted the situation. I mean, in early this year, they undergo a major revision of their ad preference system, and they have removed a large portion of this sensitive from that tech ecosystem. So then let's say we combine these techniques. On the one side, getting data directly from the Facebook dashboard, and actually they offer an API that you can query. On the other hand, we develop our own softwares that allow us having information from the user side. And combining all this, we have been doing several things like the one just I mentioned.
Could we zoom in a little bit on the Facebook ads? For a listener who's never messed around with those, maybe we've all seen them, but never set one up. Maybe their instinct might be that there's some barrier for them, that they have to be part of, an official marketing company or have a $50,000 budget or something like this. What does it actually take to put an ad on Facebook?
Any user that has a Facebook account can run ad campaigns. The dashboard is extremely intuitive, also extremely scary for due to the amount of personalization you can create with your audience. And running a campaign is up to you. You can run campaigns of millions of dollars if you want to reach, I don't know, millions or tens of millions or even more users. But you can run campaigns that cost you much less with tens of dollars and so on. I remember for this research on sensitive interest, we did an experiment in which we spent $35, and with $35, we reached around 30,000 people. So that means people that got our ad delivering the news feed. The amount you can spend depends on the budget you have for spending on ads. It does not require a lot of expertise to run campaigns in Facebook. So I'm pretty sure even small businesses are running this type of ads to reach the local neighborhood or whatever with us. If you are a restaurant or something, you can run campaigns to target user around your business. The possibilities are enormous.
Yeah, the targeting's an interesting piece because your example of a restaurant, of course, a restaurant should only sort of advertise nearby. I mean, maybe a national
Mhm.
chain is different, but a local restaurant, I don't want to see a local restaurant that's 100 miles away from my home. It's not good for me or the advertiser. So I like targeting in that extent. But how deep can I go? Can I target, left-handed people that own red Priuses?
Okay, so the last time, I don't know if these have changed, but the smallest resolution you can achieve is like selecting one point in a map, let's say, and you can create a circle of 1 mile around that point. You can target an ad campaign sold only to people living around 1 mile from your business. Also, there is other options like using zip codes or things like that in case you want to go a bit further away from your zip code. But depending on the zip code, there is zip codes that are really small. An Italian restaurant, you can say, I want to target people in this area, in this geographical area, who are interested to Italian cuisine, according to Facebook. You will reach people that, based on their browsing in Facebook or browsing in the web, in website where Facebook has cookies, etc., Facebook can infer users that are likely into Italian cuisine. So you will target only those users with your ads.
And I know using the Facebook data evaluation tool you mentioned earlier, if I were one of the people who installed that Chrome plugin, through that
Mhm.
process, you're able to see some things about my interests. Is that,
Yeah.
could you expand upon that? Is there like a Facebook taxonomy that you've tapped into behind the scenes, or what is an interest and how do you quantify it?
When we browse in Facebook or in websites or apps that where Facebook is present, we are giving information to Facebook about things that are of our interest. What Facebook does is creating a profile from such behavior. That profile, among other things, leads to a long list of things that are interest to us that Facebook call ad preferences. If, for instance, I go to Facebook and I like many pages about watches, it's very likely that Facebook will set an interest on watches. If an advertiser wants to run a campaign targeting people interested in watches, I will be one potential user for receiving those ads. What things I can learn from this if I have access to the interest Facebook has assigned to people? Things that we have done and we are working now is something we call over profiling. So the question is whether, let's say, what's the actual limit of things that can be of our interest. At a given point in time, I might be interested in, I don't know, 10, 20, 50, 100 things. Our brain will not allow us to be focused or interested in thousands of things, at least for an average people. We want to understand whether social media platforms, and we are doing this not only for Facebook, but also for Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google, whether these ad tech companies, big ad tech companies, are over profiling users. And then we have created another plugin in which basically we collect those interests from each of these platforms and we tell the users, please go and rank the interest yourself. So are you soccer? Facebook tells your interest is soccer, and we give a 5 point star ranking. So if you are very interested in soccer, you might give 5 stars. If you are not interested, you will give 1 star. And we'll ask you to do so through all your interests in the different platforms. That way, we'll be able to look at the things. First, whether you are our profile. So if at the end of the day you provide many ones in a large portion of interest, it means Facebook is assigning, Facebook or LinkedIn or Google, any of the platforms is assigning spurious interest to you for some reason that I might explain later. We have an hypothesis for this that I might explain later. We also, by comparing these platforms through this mechanism and through this tool, we can compare platforms. So we might be able to answer things like who is creating more accurate profiles from users. Is Twitter, is Facebook, is LinkedIn, is Google, and we can compare these platforms across them and try to figure out the reasons why this is happening. So first, let's stop over profiling. Let's go for accurate profiles. And second, make a transversal study regarding the accuracy of the profiles in these different platforms.
Thanks to our annual sponsor, Weights and Biases, the developer-first ML platform that gives you experiment tracking, dataset versioning, and model management. Their solution integrates with TensorFlow, sklearn, XGBoost, Hugging Face, and literally every other framework I could think of. Integrating with your model training process takes just a few lines of code. Once your machine learning code base or notebook is wired up, you've just unlocked the next level of productivity. The Weights and Biases platform collects, aggregates, and beautifully displays all of your key metrics and telemetry so you can track your model training in real time and compare different runs. Have you ever had to screenshot a matplotlib graph that you drop in an email or in Slack to show your boss the results of your work? That's like serving a gourmet dinner in a cardboard box. With Weights and Biases, all of your collaborators can see the results of different runs with an idealized interactive suite of tools. If you're on or leading a growing team of machine learning practitioners, you need to investigate if Weights and Biases is the right solution for you. Get started at w&b.me/dataskeptic and mention us when you request a demo. So when a social media platform tries to profile me, my face value understanding of that is so that they can target ads to me. Like if they say, Kyle's interested in technology, show him more technology ads, that makes sense. That's the kind of targeting I want. I don't have children.
Yeah.
I don't want baby products. It makes no sense. But is there something maybe more insidious that could be going on here? Like, could I be maybe targeted for something in a negative light? Or, what are the where does this go wrong, I guess, is my question.
First of all, is like when we discuss about the ad tech in general, there is the perception that companies' profiles or companies or data management platforms or social media platforms, etc., that they have very accurate profile from us. Unfortunately, there is no, to the best of my knowledge, a strong auditing processes that evaluate how accurate those profiles are, because this is harmful in two senses. First, as you said, if they do not profile me accurately, I might be receiving ads that might be annoying to me. If they profile me with sensitive interest, if I'm sick or I have some kind of illness, I might receive ads that might hurt my sensibility. Or someone might run a campaign. I don't know. This is an example. I never saw this, but someone could run campaigns trying to sell some kind of remedy for homosexuality, which might also hurt the sensibility of people. So there is a bunch of things why the inappropriate use of these targeting possibilities of this, they call it micro-targeting, might create some risk for users. While I'm not saying micro-targeting is bad at all, as you said, I think it's something very useful. And when I see, and I have clicked many times through ads in Facebook, especially, I don't know, for holidays and so on, I got offers in hotels and so on, and I appreciate that and I like that when they do it well. But for instance, I'm constantly receiving ads for hair, for I don't know how to say it in English, for renewing my hair, so inserting new hair on my head because I'm starting to be bald, or I don't know, making white my teeth, etc., which are the ads that somehow I would like to receive. Okay, and some people might not like to receive these ads. There is again a good side, there's a good side and a bad side of this, and then we should try to push this company to move towards the good side and providing ads that are all relevant for users, etc. And basically this requires auditing the mechanisms these companies use for creating profiles and how accurate these solutions are. At the end of the day, it's like something that probably the audience know more, which is the phishing attacks. The phishing attacks usually are linked to email, but you can do similar things with advertising. I can launch an ad campaign where I say, okay, if you click through this ad, you might win an iPhone, whatever, the last version of the iPhone. So if you click through your ad, through that ad, you go to a website, the time the attacker is controlling. There I might already do a bunch of things to try to compromise your device or obtain information from you. You want the iPhone? If you want that, please give me your name, address, profession, age, gender, a bunch of things. And I'm pretty sure you will get a low portion of users that will complete that information. And again, it's allowing you to increase your information about users and create databases. So there is a bunch of things you can do with this micro targeting, which has some risk for consumers or for users.
Even beyond micro targeting, especially when it comes to the phishing attacks, you describe the concept of nano targeting in one of your papers. I could easily see someone who wanted to, target me for a phishing attack, maybe nano target an ad that's, highly attuned to get me to click on it and fill something out, or even maybe just the click could be enough sometimes for them to get me somehow. How realistic is that? Is this a plot for a new science fiction movie, or could I go in and nano target people?
So basically, the idea of this piece of work came because there was some research done in MIT back in 2015, where they said that if they had a database of 1 million users from a mobile company, and they said, okay, if I know the location and the time where a user make a phone call or receive a phone call, with 4 calls is enough to uniquely identify the user in this million users database. And they repeat the same, but for credit card purchases. If I know the location and the time, more or less roughly the location and time where you have made a purchase, 4 data points are enough for making you unique in the database. And we say this nice, a good academic research, which somehow is telling us the theoretical bound of our privacy as users. So basically, as low as 4 data points are enough to identify one user in a database of 1 million users. But we say, okay, this is very difficult to activate because very few people has access to this information, to the phone call time and location or the credit card purchases. And we immediately thought on the online advertising ecosystem and say, okay, how we can we use some information or create audiences in the online advertising ecosystem that are so small that actually lead to a single user, and even more, can we activate those audiences in order to deliver individual ads to only one user, to only one user, the user I'm targeting. And what we did is using again the interest Facebook assigned to user to make this analysis. So we answer the question, how many interests do I need to know from my user so that user become unique in the whole Facebook ecosystem? So we are not talking anymore about 1 million users. We are talking about 3 billion users. So roughly speaking, 40% of the humanity. So the point is, how many interests make you unique in the world? And we came up with an answer that either 22 random interests from these 400 I mentioned before, or 4 rare interests make you unique in Facebook. We did not stop in this theoretical result, and we say, no, we want to know whether we can activate this campaign. Let's say we target ourselves with ads and we demonstrated this is feasible. You can send an ad exclusively to a user in Facebook. And the funny part is that this is almost free. Since you make very few impressions because your audience is so reduced, basically one user, some of our campaigns we make 1 or 2 impressions and Facebook did not charge us. And some others there was 6 cents or something like that. So this is ridiculous. Might be used for phishing attacks or for manipulating users. If you think on elections and so on, you can target individual users. We found out examples, not academic work, but example of people that have tried sort to do this. And there was one guy, he tells that he and his wife use this system for sending love messages. I love you, I miss you so much, and so on. And basically, we have to say that in our research, because we only use ad preferences. But if you think that apart from your interests, I know your age, I know your gender, I know the city where you live, or even the zip code where you live, I will not need 20 interests. Maybe with 2 or 3 plus your zip code, I'm done. Now, jumping to your question, whether this real fiction or no, it's not real fiction because we prove it can be done. But it's true that we could do this because we had access to the interest Facebook has assigned us. We didn't have to figure out the ad preferences. Okay, we knew the actual ad preference we had. In a real attack, the attacker will need either to implement something that allows access to the ad preference this user has in Facebook, or we'll need to infer them somehow. Forget about that preference. If I know your gender, your age, the zip code where you live, company where you work, and so on, that will reduce a lot the necessity of inferring many interests. The more I know from you, the more efficient can be my marketing messages. I think we need to, or the industry and the stakeholders need to think of a reasonable limit, audience limit that say, okay, we will never allow campaigns that target less than 100, 300. The limit in Facebook is supposed to be 1,000 and LinkedIn is supposed to be 300. So there's not even an agreement of what that's it. So they establish those limits, but they don't enforce them.
Your proof of concept that you can do some of this nano targeting, and Facebook actually did the verification for you, right? It's their analytics that said you got 1 or 2 impressions. So they are violating that policy. Do you think that's a temporary measure and something that's been overlooked, or is that a harder thing to enforce than it looks like on paper?
I mean, I don't think it's harder to improve. Also, we didn't have the chance to, because also usually Facebook, when we do this type of research, tends to ignore us. So say our research is wrong, we are assuming wrong things, we are doing wrong, blah 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 blah. But they never told to us. Basically, they told journalists came to us, and journalists told to Facebook. Facebook tried to, let's say, downgrade our research and say their answers are very vague and do not go to the point. But honestly, I don't. I think this is more probably it's more about an internal problem because these are very large companies, you know. So maybe the team that cares about privacy and imposes this limit of 1,000, because it's true that if you go to the dashboard and you configure any audience you want, the only message you will get, your audience is lower than 1,000 users, but you will never know whether it is 20, 300, or 900, which is a nice feature. But probably there is another team that is in charge of the advertising or the real advertising campaigns, and they don't enforce this limit. So technically, what we say that impose a limit and then don't allow running campaigns for audiences lower than that limit is something you are doing already, because in the dashboard you are already imposing that limit and you don't provide that information. That means internally you know how to do that. When I'm going to run the campaign, you verify the same thing and you say, okay, no, this is below our limit of 1,000, and I don't allow you to run the campaign. In this particular case, because in the sensitive data, I don't know, they might make revenue or some part of the revenue out of sensitive ad preference. I don't know. But these nano-targeting campaigns we run, they don't generate revenue for them because they are almost free. So even from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense for them allowing to run campaigns that target very few people, because they will generate very few impressions. They will receive very little money. When you have to trade off between privacy and business or revenue and whatever, I can understand that sometimes they say, okay, if I privilege privacy, I'm gonna lose revenue. But in this case, it's not the case. So I don't understand why they are not enforcing those limits. There's neither technical reason nor business reason for this, from my point of view.
Oh, well, I have a hypothesis about the business reason. Twofold. One is maybe some of those rare groups do convert, like if you target people who want to purchase yachts, that's not many, but it's a high conversion point. And
Mhm.
then separately, by having an additional advertiser, you're putting a little pressure on other advertisers. They'll say, hey, this guy will pay me $1. Why don't you pay me $1.10?
I mean, yeah, it might be that you increase the conversion rate, but again, uh, it's why not targeting, as I say, 100 or 1,000, because at the end you think of marketing campaigns, you usually don't want to bring one user to your restaurant. So in general, for the vast majority of advertising in Facebook, you cannot think of a use case where they will be all interested in reaching one user. So then the point again is like, if this imply, I don't know, 0.01% of my revenue or even less, I'm creating serious risk for the users for a very little piece of the cake.
Are you aware of any maybe high profile uses of this approach? Has, I don't know, like a criminal been caught doing this or anything that's made the news?
The only thing we read when we did doing this research that was funny, and we actually reflected in our paper, I don't know whether this is true or not. We found this in a couple of news outlets. That's why we included it, because it was in several places. And what they say is it was using something different because they were using the custom audiences of Facebook, but which is something that allows you uploading a list of emails and tell Facebook, okay, match these emails with your users and send the ads to only users in this list. The story tells that in the elections, I think 2017 election in UK for the parliament, the leader of the Labourist Party at the time, that was Jeremy Corbyn, wanted to spend a lot of money on marketing in order to boost the participation in the elections. But their advisors, their political advisors, did not agree in this strategy. So what they did is creating one custom audience with Corbyn, some close collaborator, some close journalists, and so on, and they created an ad campaign where they were doing what Corbyn wanted. That is trying to boost the participation, encouraging people to go to cast their votes, etc., etc., etc. They ran this campaign and they spent, I don't know, if £5,000. They very little money for a big country parliament campaign. But that way they ensure that Corbyn and the close circle were receiving ad according to what they wanted to do. So they somehow were convinced that many more people were receiving those ads. Somehow they, let's say, their own advisors manipulate them and make them believe that they were following their orders, but they spend the money in something else. You can browse the internet and you can find this story. But when you see ads on Facebook, it's very rare that a user thinks, okay, this ad is only for me and just for me. You don't have this perception, and you think this is something that is being targeted to many more people. So somehow you are exposed to a reality that with these techniques might be created ad hoc for you.
Yeah, as you point out, you'd already kind of recommended maybe they shouldn't be able, maybe the average person who can go on and put ads on Facebook shouldn't be able to launch any that have such small audiences because it enables the opportunity to do this nano-targeting behavior. Do you have any other recommendations if you were given, a direct audience with Mark Zuckerberg? What do you think should change about Facebook?
But I guess there are many things to be changed on Facebook. But on the other hand, I don't want to give the impression that I think Facebook is something bad for society, or Google is something bad for society, or Amazon or Microsoft and so on. I think they have changed. These companies have changed the society. I think they have bring many good things for society. So no doubt on how they have improved the communication among people. No doubt that they have helped to create some cohesion in the sense that now I'm able. I mean, if I go to work to wherever US or whatever, I'm still connected to my local community in a way I couldn't dream 20 years back. So there are many things that they have done for society. Later, there is the big questions about whether they are impacting democracy, whether they are polarizing our society, and so on. But I'm not 100% sure this is a problem of the technology or a problem of the people. So here's like the egg and chicken game. Let's say it's like, do algorithms of social media platforms polarize society, or what these algorithms are just showing us in front of the mirror? And what they are telling is like, actually, as human beings, we want a polarized society. And this what we are interested in and so on, and our behavior leads to us as society. So I do not have the answer for this, but I do not have clear that, as it seems now in news outlets and everywhere, that the arrow goes in one direction, that is, social media is the responsible for polarization in society. So answering your question, what I would recommend Zuckerberg, if I were able to talk to him, first, to devote resources to understand this big question. So are the platforms responsible for this, or is the other way around? And to invest resources, but seriously, on this, because the interventions you have to do are different depending on the arrow, on what is the direction of the arrow. So one might be more dedicated to education and other efforts that try to reduce the polarization in the society, while the other, if the arrow goes in the direction that platforms are the ones responsible for polarization, then it requires intervention and regulation that avoids algorithms to increase this polarization. So that I think is a big question that has not been answered. And unfortunately, it seems as society there is a strong bias towards telling who is the responsible for the current situation.
Well, there were a number of really interesting statistics that I found in your paper and in our conversation today. One which was very intuitive was that it takes 4 specific interests to identify me. Not super surprising because, I like rare things and a combination of 3 or 4 rare things. I'm the only human being who ever picked those exact 3 or 4. But the one that was a bit surprising was with, I think you said 22 random interests
Yeah.
you could tell me apart. Because one of my random interests is Google. I mean, that doesn't really inform me
Yeah.
about anything that I like Google. Could you expand upon that result? Was it surprising to you as well?
I mean, it wasn't surprising because, as I mentioned before, there was previous research that already was anticipating how fragile is our privacy. With few data points, they already demonstrate that in a database with million users, 4 data points were enough for making a user unique. I mean, I was surprised in the sense that I would expecting that when we are talking about 3 billion users, we will need a bit more than 4 data points. The lesson, and later the 20 something random interest, was also surprising in the sense that we will be expecting maybe a bit more, but we were sure that there will be not a very huge number. You will need 100 interests or something. What we have to learn from this type of research is how fragile is our privacy. It's very difficult that a user has the power to avoid this type of identification. Even if you think of a news media outlet, even if I jump into CNN website because it's my favorite one, and I consume news there every day, they might create a profile from myself that at some point might be unique. Why? Because I might be the only one that access. I mean, not the only one, but I might like, I don't know, news from sports combined, but not every sport. It could be NBA. I tend to read things from New York Knicks. At the same time, I'm interested into foreign politics, so I read news from foreign politics, etc., etc. So even a single website might already been able to uniquely identify you among any other user that have ever accessed a CNN website. That's why I'm telling, like, even if we manage to do things, stop cookies, stop fingerprinting, stop many of these things, we will not be safe from being labeled as unique users. And I just gave one example, which I think is simple, like the CNN case. But there are many other platforms, social media, etc., that can do exactly the same without requiring external information.
Having come to those realizations, do you find yourself changing anything about your online behavior?
This is a very interesting question, and I always say the same. And when they pose me this question, it's like, I think our generation, I don't know how old are you, I'm 41,
Same.
and and the point is like our notion of privacy and our in our DNA, privacy was something completely different and was like I close the window or don't leave the door open because your neighbor might, I don't know, might see that my house is tidy or not, or whether. So, we have a very basic principle of privacy in which privacy was something physical, was someone that could look at what you are doing and what you are doing, and I don't know, at your habits or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think this is very embedded in our perception. And even we are savvy people in the sense that we know how this works and so on. At the end of the day, when you are browsing, I many times accept the cookies and I don't read the terms of use because I want to read the news. I don't want to be constantly providing consent, rejecting consent, or selecting which cookies I'm interested on, and so on. Let's say I'm not good implementing the examples I'm giving here, but we have, I think, as society, we have a very important task that is training younger generations. If our generation, we are already very digital. I see my nephew and my niece that are now between 10 and 13. They are going to be fully digital. When they play games online. When they are fully digital. But I was reading a tweet today that say that data protection regulations should focus on elder people rather than teenagers, because teenagers are savvy users and know much more about technology than our generation. I fully disagree with this tweet, because teenagers are savvy users of managing applications, but they don't know what's happening behind the scene. So they say they are very savvy users in the front end, but they don't know anything about the back end. And I think it's important to have education courses where we teach the basics on how all the online exposure is being used by others, by third parties, to commercialize the information, to exploit the information, what are the potential risks they might have, etc., etc. And I think we as society are assuming that they will know this, because since they are into technology much more than we were, and from very early age, they will know about this. And I completely disagree with that. And I think we need to educate these people, because they will be in a probably much more wild digital world than we are nowadays.
I don't think I can say social media is new, but it's still a relatively young idea. I don't think we've reached a stable equilibrium about how much governance we think there should be on these sorts of things. Today, these are private companies. They're black boxes that get to make these decisions. Do you think it's going to remain that way, or do you have an alternative vision for the future?
The big problem we have, or I think the big problem of big companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., is that they are monopolies. As we did in Europe in the 80s, where we have the telephone companies monopolies, we should break those monopolies. Open the market to other players that can provide similar services. But there is an important point here, which is something we achieved in the 80s when we break the monopoly, or the public monopoly, of telco operators, is the interoperability. Okay, so basically, the idea I want to express is like there shouldn't be only one Facebook. There should be Facebook A, Facebook B, Facebook C, Facebook D, Facebook E. But irrespectively whether I'm in Facebook A, Facebook B, or Facebook D, I should get access to the same functionalities, and I should be able to interoperate with any other player or any other friend that is in Facebook D while I'm in Facebook A. For that, it requires an important effort in standardization to standardize interoperability, the same way we did in the 80s. And now I can choose one telco company based on many different factors, on the prices, on the speed they offer, on the whatever, on the ethics of this company, etc. When we have this type of services, privacy data protection will play a role, because some user might decide to join Facebook C because it better respect my privacy, or because I pay €5 a month but they don't collect any data from me. Right now, there is one option only for users, and the ones imposing the business models are Facebook, Google, etc. But the user doesn't have a say, or doesn't have a chance to choose. Either you take it or you leave it. So either I use Google, or you go and use other search engines. Either I use Facebook, or go and use other social media where you have less friends, or whatever. Either I use WhatsApp, or there is not. I know there is some other competitor. There is few competitors, but if we will enforce interoperability for providing these functionalities and the services, I think privacy, data protection, and let's say ethical practices will have a say on the decision of the users. While we keep the monopolies, doesn't matter. Our privacy will be always in risk, because at the end, the business model of these companies will be the one ruling the ecosystem.
Well, is there anywhere people can follow you and your work online?
Okay, so basically, I'm on Twitter with the hashtag ACRUMIN. Later, they can look for me in LinkedIn. In any of these places, they can find my website where I used to post my work, etc., etc.
Sounds good. Well, I'll have links to those in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your work.
Thank you very much for having me here. It was a real pleasure.
That's all for this week. If you haven't already, please join our newsletter at dataskeptic.com. And here's a quick preview of what's coming up next week.
Another one is whether the products that you sell are actually aligned with the customer demographics that you intend. Our system would answer that.
That's next time on Data Skeptic Ad Tech.